I think that's pretty, maybe not. I don't know. I think it's pretty rare.
I think so too. It seems rare, but the nature of TSC, it seems like it makes sense to me that the organization, if it's going to work, it's almost like everybody has to be passionate and on some level.
Yeah,
well, they don't have to be, but it's going to be better.
We have become this model rare disease nonprofit because we have really smart people working for us who stay and who also, across the board, every one of us brings some type of empathy to the table, and we hire for those skills. And, it's brutally hard to get hired by us anyway. But when we're doing interviews, we all interview everybody.
Everybody interviews. Yeah.
It's like, I'm okay with science people determining that whoever we're hiring has those skills, but what I look for is the personal piece, the empathy piece, and because it's so crucial to who we are as an organization. And,
absolutely.
And I think people like you and most anybody who's around our staff can instantly see we all believe and care very much about what we do. Oh
yeah, there's no doubt. That's never ever been something that I thought, oh man, they don't care at all. Never.
And so, and there's nonprofits who come across that way for sure. And, I've said it before, it all comes back to everything we do is focused on what is going to help our community live a better day tomorrow. And that's just central to my job every morning. And the person who answers the phone at our office to Kari and everybody in between, it drives everything we do. And it sounds really simple, but if you think about it, if that's where your focus is day in and day out, that's what leads to success in my mind. So.
Absolutely. But that also requires a high amount of personal, emotional energy. So how do you manage the day in and day out stressors? What do you do?
Well, the truth of it is I learned how to cry. And
really?
I embrace crying, the good cry and the bad cry, as being an essential piece of who I am as a human. So it sounds, I hope it doesn't sound trite, but it's true. I mean, I talk to people and I, quote unquote, feel the pain and it affects me deeply. And so I allow myself to cry about it because I think for me, for Jaye Isham, it's such an essential piece of, I'm one of these people who wears everything on my sleeve. If I'm super up, everybody knows. If I'm super down, everybody knows. I don't hide it. And I don't have much in between. I'm like really high or really low. Luckily,
I hear ya.
90% of the time I'm in the high, aisle. But so I do that. But outside of that, I live in New Mexico now, as I mentioned, and, I do a lot of outdoor stuff here. I also mentioned I'm a musician, so I can go literally once or twice a day if I'm hitting the wall trying to write or something. I go
What kind of music? Tell me about that a little bit.
Rock music. I played in bands since I was in high school. Started as a drummer and switched to guitar probably 20 years ago. But
so you're really experienced.
Well, yeah. The whole time I was in DC up until, 2015, I stopped playing in a band. But I was in band. So, I'd work all weekend on Saturday nights. I was playing bars. And that's just, people who play music, it's another thing. It's just like this innate piece of you that you can't do without. And so I go downstairs and, I've got some electric guitars and these days I mostly play acoustic just because it's.
Do you write songs?
Not really.
No.
No.
Just play?
I just goof around.
Yep.
And I know what I know, and I certainly don't consider myself an accomplished guitarist, but I have a blast doing it, and it's certainly a great outlet. And
I grew up with my dad was a guitar guy, banjos, guitars. I just it is.
And it's
an
something
innate
you
part.
can just kind of do and go outside and do by yourself, and it's a nice release. But also big movie buff. we go to movies quite a bit. And, so,
Yep.
That's kind of what I do. And then the last thing is, I'm a dog person. We have 4 miniature pinschers, and
holy crap. I know what those are. They're very active, if I'm right.
They are, we have mom and dad. Dad's 16, mom's 14, and then we have 2 of their pups, which are both 12. It's insane. 4 dogs is just insane.
That's insane.
But it's our family, and
that's great.
They're awesome, but we've missed out on like traveling and vacations and stuff. We had, for a while back when we lived in the DC area, I had a friend who had a high school, college age kids who could house sit for us. And, that's early on, more than 2 years ago. And once we lost that, we had one bad experience leaving them in a kennel. So we were always kind of reticent to go anywhere.
Yeah.
But now I've got family out here who can watch them, so we're able to.
Oh, that's good.
Do some vacations, which is very new for us. So.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
It's so great. I mean, we went to Toronto, and then
had you been to Toronto before?
I had not.
I've only been there once, and I loved
what
it.
An amazing city,
right?
So I worked a couple of days at the conference. We're starting TSC Academy, which you may have heard about, and which is going to be an online learning tool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's absolutely necessary.
Part of it will be these short 60 to 90 second videos from researchers and doctors and all of that. So during the research conference, we had a very captive group of those experts there. So I spent 2 9-hour days in a hotel room with a videographer, and we interviewed, I think, 17 people in 2 days.
Wow.
Anyway, that was great. And I learned all kinds of stuff that I didn't know, which I usually do, which was cool. But then we took like 3 extra days just as a vacation. And it was so great. I mean, that's something as far as an outlet that we haven't done in many, many years. And so it was super cool to do that. And what a great place. I mean, we went to Niagara Falls one day, and that's
great.
Incredible. The tour guide was telling us that they have, they speak more than 100 languages there.
And it's funny. We get just so ethnocentric,
it was like a whole other world. And it's kind of like New York City, I suppose, with the diversity. People there are all super friendly.
Right. I was going to say it's much friendlier.
It's so very different vibe than New York City, although I love New York City too, but it just is friendly. And even though it's this huge city, I think there's 3 million people there. It's very laid back, and the pace is kind of slow, and I fell in love with it.
Did you? I can hear that.
It was great. Yeah.
That's cool. Really cool. So what is your vision or dreams for obviously finding a cure? As far as the community, and do you have anything that you haven't mentioned?
I think you had asked on Facebook about questions, and somebody asked about how do you reach people that don't have the internet, and all of those things. That's actually been part of our strategic plan. I mean, it's written in there how we want to try to reach people, particularly in rural areas that not only probably may or may not know about the TS Alliance, but just don't even have any doctors at all that have a clue. And it's certainly a huge challenge. We haven't cracked that nut yet. I'll admit it for sure.
Well, I don't know. It's like a process, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, and if
What is?
I don't know that it's feasible that the TS Alliance could reach somebody who hasn't contacted us. But I think coming at it from these other angles of having physician education opportunities at medical conferences, which we do, and offering CME, continuing medical education courses on tuberous sclerosis, which we do, because I mean, I think there's in the neurologists, that world, I think the profile of TSC is certainly higher now than it was 15 years ago. Primary care physicians, not so much. And, I remember early on somebody telling me that in medical school, at least years ago, there was like one paragraph about TSC in a medical school. So I hope that's better now. I mean,
I'd say it's better.
But it's still just this huge challenge of, how do you educate primary care physicians, particularly around infantile spasms, because those still get so misdiagnosed. It's frightening. And as you and your listeners know, the longer you wait to treat those, every day is not a good thing. And so, how do you get to ER physicians, primary care physicians who won't say, well, it's colic or whatever, shaken baby syndrome that people get accused of? There's some really bad horror stories out there that keep happening. So
I can't even believe it. Like when I'll interview somebody and they tell me, that this happened or that happened, I realize how lucky I am to live near a hub, near Boston and near a good clinic.
Right.
Because, I mean.
That, you mentioned the clinics. I mean, when I started, I think there were 4 TSC clinics. Now there's 68, 70, something like that. Which is crazy.
There really?
Yeah. So there's been this huge explosion there as well. And all of those things are good, but still there's quote unquote 50,000 people in the U.S. with tuberous sclerosis complex. We think we know about 15 to 20,000 of those. So who are in our database at work, so to speak. So there's this chunk, a majority really, that we haven't reached yet. And in a perfect world, I would love for all of those people to know we're around.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the best kind of vision you can have.
And, I think social media has been a huge plus in that regard. I mean, of all the negative crap that happens with it, that piece has helped a lot. I remember early on, I mentioned
tell me.
Me and this guy were talking about how Facebook would never be around. And I remember waking up one morning and I had a Facebook message, not a phone call on our 800 number, not an email to info@tsalliance.org, but a private message to Jaye on Facebook. It was an 18-year-old girl who had her baby the night before in El Paso, Texas. She wrote this at 3 a.m. and she said, they told me my little baby has tuberous sclerosis complex. What do I do? And this was on Facebook. And that's when the light bulb totally went off for me that everything has now changed. And I still get those types of emails that people find out about the Tuberous Sclerosis Alliance on social media instead of Googling and finding us on Google.
It's like if every hospital or major hospitals could say, we have this, or like every time a kid's diagnosed. But I mean, that's, what you guys are doing. It's just.
Yeah. And it's just,
getting them to social media. Cause it seems like every time I go on like the TS Mom site or whatever, there's new people. There's people coming on all the time.
All the time.
It's overwhelming.
Well, like I said, there's almost 10,000 people on our Facebook group. And, granted, that's not just the United States. There's people there from all over the world, but the majority is the U.S. And oftentimes that's where they're going for information. They don't call us. And I spend a lot of time behind the scenes, like turning people on to Dina Hook or getting Dina involved. And I mean, there have been Saturday nights where I've seen something and I called Dina and I'm like,
I've sent her people
this now. Yeah. And it's just, I read every post on that
page.
Really? And mostly, I mean, every once in a while, something inappropriate gets on there that you got to deal with. But the other thing that is great about our discussion group is that it allows us to, as an organization, see what the most important issues are. And right now, as you're well aware, it's behavior and CBD. And it's just those types of things started bubbling up about 3 years ago. And, as you're well aware now, we have a huge focus on TSC-associated neuropsychiatric disorders, TAN, which is just this big fancy name for all these crappy behaviors that people have to deal with. And, I remember, I think it was New Year's Day, everybody was posting Happy New Year's, and there was a father who